Mankind has come a long way since he learned how to control fire. And yet now, in the 21st century, he has created more than fire. He has created chains to bind himself into a system whereby he passes on the control of his own life to others. Businesses, religions, royalties, and governments have all sought to gain power by having control over our mental and physical states. They have utilized our own nature to achieve this. And these powers joined forces into a secret cabal we call the Illuminati. They have created a true matrix of deceit, and we are all being manipulated. From the marketplace to the school, all manner of magical devices have been dreamed up to entice and entrap us. We have closed our eyes and minds to the truth of the system we are now part of. And because of this, we are now totally unaware of the deceit in which we reside. In fact, we even perpetuate it by repeating the propaganda of those in power. Almost everything we think and do is the result of illusion created by those in power. It is time to unlock these secrets and find freedom. From the very beginning, mankind has sought to free his mind from the constraints of a consciousness that seemed to bind him into a world divided. The animals around him followed natural cycles and marched thousands of miles in tune with the breath of the earth, the phases of the moon, and the warmth of the sun. Man pondered this remarkable phenomena because he was now aware of it, and this awareness gave him the need to explain it. Without explanation, everything seemed strange, and he therefore feared it. What man did not understand, he could not control. And lack of control and understanding meant simply one thing: chaos. The consciousness of the mind needed order to survive, and so he began to form structures within his thoughts for all things. He gave symbols and words to everything that previously didn't need them. The bird didn't care that it was a bird. The fish just were, and the lions were boss in their own domain. The mind of man came along and gave them all names, and forced them and himself into ordered boxes. This simply led to constraint, and man had begun to form his own prison. He made names for leaders, gave them wonder and awe. He created gods and deities and worshipped them. He ordered his tribe and family structures, and at the end of all this, he had developed dogma, doctrine, rules, and regulations. Man had made a world of control, and he had no understanding of what he had done. Now, thousands and thousands of years later, our ordering of everything has created a chaotic mess, the direct opposite of what we had intended with our conscious mind. The animals, without self-awareness and higher consciousness, still have their natural and ordinary lives. They do not fear having this or that. They just exist. They, like all things natural, find balance. We, with our millennia of striving to order our lives, have created chaos. And now billions of people are messed up and seeking reconnection to nature. We all know that we are born and that we die. We know that we exist, and so we therefore have a personality. We are individual. This individual is precious to us because we believe it is us. The fear comes when we realize that this individual will one day die, and so it is not the fear of death itself, but the loss of the self. We have created wondrous, imaginative answers to this problem, however, by explaining to our own minds that our body is not really us, and that it is simply a container carrying the self. When this container withers and rots, the true self, or soul, shall carry on after death and be transported to heaven, nirvana, or any other amazing realm perceived and fashioned by our ancestors. It is a triumph of consciousness, a prize of logical thought, that in the first place we became aware of our own frailties and then discovered that it was all just a minor test on the road to St. Peter's pearly gates. And all of this was the beginning of the loss of true control. We handed our fears over to a man in a robe, and he started to guide our lives. Today, in the 21st century, as the old-fashioned concepts of religion are constantly bombarded by new empowered free thinkers and science, we are finding new ways of explaining our lot. Anything from cloning and freezing our bodies to superior alien minds and quantum oneness are being trumpeted out for our choosing. From the physical to the metaphysical, like the shopping malls of downtown LA, we can choose an answer that suits our own personal life, peer group, and sense of right and wrong. The driving force, regardless of century, is still the same: fear. Fear is now so complex that it is a paradox in our so-called ordered society. But we need to strip away all the myriad excuses we come up with to replace the word fear and realize that it all revolves around the loss of self. It is in fact the sickness at the heart of consciousness, and overcoming this one core principle will set you truly free onto a road without delusions. The reason? Because we create delusions to escape it, The marketing men of the world use every chance they get to pull finely woven threads from our fears and form webs that trap us. If you overcome fear, then you will realize that your life has been spent in a web created from your own emotions. All forms of fear are ugly and create ugly offspring. We see these as separate kinds of fear, but they are all from the same parent. Fear breeds and breeds. It spreads from you to your children. It evolves and transmutes. It creates prejudice and hatred. Fear is constantly used to manipulate our thoughts, our purchases, our votes, and our wallets. We need only watch the television commercials to see how fear is used to control our actions. If we know that we are deluding ourselves by going to church on Sunday or buying happiness during retail therapy, then we add guilt and confusion on top of fear. This is an economic world. It is structured around money, and anything that gets in the way of the machine is more often than not moved or eradicated. There is no room for anything to oppose this. Each one of us is in the system, whether we like it or not, and we believe there is often precious little we can do about it. It all began when man decided to cease his nomadic lifestyle and settle down. Our newfound settlements had to find ways to deal with their new social problems, and the mind of man has a unique tool for the purpose: imagination. Man developed, from within his own imagination, new social structures of tribal leadership, and those who maintained or learned new skills important for the group would become dominant. These were not always the strongest and best fighters or hunters, but more often than not, those who knew how to heal and gel the community. We call these people medicine men, shaman, and latterly priests. As the Old Testament so eruditely informs us, it was the priesthood who would guide the people and even crown kings. The royal family of England is still to this day crowned by the church as a direct result of this same ancient power structure. Uniting religion and state, and thereby solidifying power over everybody else. And all of this through the pure imagination of man. With this new advent of power came many new ways of manipulating the growing masses who were herded into the new imaginative religious structure and given rules in the form of dogma, doctrine, and tradition. Now power was from the gods, and nobody could argue with such imagined power. The knowledge of navigation, of the stars, of the seasons, and of the course of the reality of the mind of man became powerful tools in the armory of the church. To know the seasons enabled the priests to appear magical and in touch with God. To know how to read the stars for navigation enabled the tribe to trade and invade. To know the mind of man allowed the priesthood to manipulate and control. All of this was truly a powerful knowledge. This knowledge was passed down within the brotherhoods in symbolism, latterly in texts, and certainly in tradition. Tradition is not simply something we imagine our grandparents had. It is not just something those stuffy-looking, pompous Englishmen reenact every day in Parliament, or that wonderfully colorful changing of the guard outside the gates of Buckingham Palace. Our English term tradition comes from traditio, a Latin word meaning the delivery of doctrine, and surrender. But more pertinent to us, it means something handed down. There is depth here, as many will know. Tradition is the continuance of something profound. In the very first usage of the word, we find that it was in fact used for the passing on of doctrine and religious dogma, a sacred act itself, and something which became symbolic. The word sacred itself comes from Old Latin secaris, meaning to bind, restrict, enclose, and protect. And this is where much of the truth lies, in symbolism and sacredness. For both are binding and surrendering to something being passed down. There is no truth that the taking of the bread and wine at the Eucharist ritual, a tradition seen across the world, actually is the body and blood of Jesus Christ. No, the act is symbolic and solemnly reminds the religious initiate of the fact that he is part of a greater Christian brotherhood, that he is accepting Christ, and that his body was broken and blood spilled for us, and that he is a continuation of a long line. Whatever one's opinion on that religious act, the fact remains that it is a very powerful tool for reminding the masses of their place in the world via an act that is emotionally strong. This is a manipulating tradition, kept alive to keep the sheep in the fold. As we can now see, tradition can be a very strong device when allied to emotion. And psychologists have discovered that allegorical tales are very often absorbed better than any literal telling. In our modern materialistic state, we forget that we are human beings that have come from and live in the natural universe. We forget because we create things from within our own imaginations and surround ourselves with them. and hence we today find ourselves in an imaginary world of things. It is this ability of the mind to create a concept that has spawned stories and tales, myths and fables to explain to each new generation the knowledge of the last. These incredible and intuitive traditions emerged from early man and his understanding of the world around him and how he survived. But all was not well in mankind's early settled Edens, and differences of opinion would often arise between settled groups or tribes, and not least of these differences was jealousy. This distinctly negative element of the human mind would involve jealousy over land, produce, mates, and of course the still relevant modern problem of jealousy over holy sites. However, trade also played a big part in the greater mix, and so tribes grew steadily more and more wealthy in terms of possessions, as each area had its own special supply of salt, gold, animals, plants, and even access routes to the more distant lands. This was the birth of our modern system many thousands of years ago, built upon an unnatural desire to remain in one location, and yet also built upon the natural desire to be the best, one of the strongest evolutionary drives. This is the root of the desire for power. Settlements became trading posts for vast quantities of goods, and demarcation of roles emerged with blacksmiths, farmers, potters, and all manner of other roles. Trading went on like this for millennia, with the priesthood often controlling the process and growing in power themselves as their own communities prospered. They would take a percentage of the produce and offer it to the gods in order to maintain the weather and good fortune of the tribe. The greatest of gods, the sun, would be worshipped and aided in its journey to reappear the following day. It was the giver of life and the destroyer. It mirrored the duality in the mind of man himself, and so we were formed in his likeness. We were solar beings, formed and given life by the power of the golden orb, and nothing became more important than ensuring its daily and yearly cycles. The priests of this great power were the alpha males, the medicine men or shaman of earlier times. It was they who gave authority to the king or pharaoh, who himself must be the son of the sun on earth. He was the marketing tool of the priesthood, and history is awash with the violent downfalls of the solar king when he stepped out of line and upset the priesthood. Markets emerged near or even in temples and bustled with people and produce of the wider world. Social commerce also emerged as priesthood shared or traded knowledge with other cultures, and soon belief systems across vast continents had little to set them apart. Much of this knowledge or tradition was very important and of value to the community, and involved knowledge of astrology and astronomy to enable them to predict the seasons and for navigation. Control of the trading markets, both of the land upon which it was carried out and the navigation required to operate it, grew so powerful over time that the priesthood would do almost anything to maintain control. This is why much religious literature is awash with rules and regulations for trade and commerce. The system of trading eventually needed organizing differently because of lies. It all began because of deceit, and it remains pretty much the same today. At the market, a thing called a promise emerged, whereby a man trading a goat for a pig would promise to bring his goat the following market day, only to fail in his promise. The priesthood or leader who controlled the process realized that some new system was needed to come into play, and so created money, from the word monere, meaning to warn. This new money was very cleverly based upon the gods themselves, adding incredible weight and fear to the promise. Gold was manifestly the solar divinity, the sun, and silver was the lunar deity, a mirror of the sun. Handing over a symbolic representation of the gods was a powerful promise, and the gods would know if you reneged on your promise. The church itself backed the promise, and so became the bank. Power was well and truly in the hands of the few, and the rest of us simply had no choice but to conform. This situation is almost unchanged, and today many banks are at least still partly owned by various churches, not least of which is the Catholic Church. Our lives are still and more so than ever run by money, and we have no choice but to live in the world of commerce. Every day, we hand over our images of the solar deities, which are no longer even real gold, but instead are promises of gold. There are more promises of gold in the world than there is gold, and so the system, created because of lies and deceit, is itself a total lie. But it is the system we live in, and individually we must make our own decisions on how to do so. But there is more deception than we know, and it is to these deceptions we must now turn. From the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, we are subjects of a massive machine. We are plugged in like a light that is only alive and lit by the machine, and because of this, we no longer know how to shine for ourselves. But many do not realize that the machine in fact feeds from us, using our energy to capture and grow the machine, that in turn captures more and more people hourly. we are all in one way or another slaves to the machine. We have seen how money enslaved us because of the lie and deceit of man, and how power was built and maintained by the few over the many. Today, it is the driving force of society. Every single one of us must sell something to get money. Whether we sell our skills, services, products, or even our very soul, we all must constantly sell to earn. And because everybody is selling to everybody else, we also buy and buy. In our overpopulated world, full of people who no longer know the skills of basic survival, we must buy the basic products such as food and even water. But man has used his unique imagination to make better and more imaginative food and water, or so we believe. In fact, we dress up the ordinary and use our own inbuilt psychology to convince others that this added value is worth the extra money. We place a clever label on a bottle of water, add mystique, and then charge a ridiculous amount of money for what is basically a free product of the earth that we can longer have access to as individuals because of the society we have created. We do the same for all manner of goods. In addition to this, we also create products or services that we do not need and again add value or perception that we want to buy into. In the end, the whole process reveals how easy it can be with this special knowledge to take from another. Create a dream and then sell it, and nobody realizes that they are in fact buying into exactly that, a dream from within the mind of another. It is not reality, if indeed we can decide on what reality truly is anymore. It is not needed. It is just desired because of our bastardized social norm and position. We pay more for water in a fancy bottle than the worth of both the bottle and the water, and all because it may have a French and classy-sounding name. This water is shipped thousands of miles to get to your door, when all along there is water almost everywhere on this planet. We pay a fortune for a ready-prepared plastic bag full of salad produce that meets with our modern lifestyles, whilst all along we fill our gardens with plastic lights, barbecues, and pretty flowers. In parallel with this, people starve in the third world. What is reality? Ask a starving child and see if it's the same as your own perception, if you truly need a personal benchmark. Our reality is not true reality. It is not reality, and it is not needed. It is all self-perpetuating a massive lie, and we all in our daily lives help to continue the cycle. We all make dreams and sell them to others, and we then end up believing them ourselves, and before anybody realizes it, we are all living in a dream world that simply does not exist. Our very nature, dreams and desires trap us and are used against us, for and by us. Nobody can now claim to be free of all of this, nor innocent of its abuse. But today, there is yet another level of control upon us, and one in which we as human beings are rapidly becoming lost. It is a world of dreams in such an incredibly profound and stark fashion that we ought to be amazed that we have fallen into its gaping mouth. As the battle to beat everybody has ensued, it has brought all manner of imaginative inventions. These are forms manifested from within the mind of man. The technologies of today are in fact taking us further and further away from reality and more into the dream state than ever before. Billions of children around the world are being fed unrealities by computer games. They live out their precious lives in a world that is not real, whilst mom and dad spend their every waking moment battling and selling to pay for the products of the delusional world. This causes yet more division within each mind, but also within the family unit. And because all of this is an illusion, not one of them is truly fulfilled, and so the family eventually breaks down, and division in the form of divorce often occurs. The child is only being prepared for one thing: a life of exactly the same as his parents, a treadmill of buy and sell and lack of self-knowledge. Instead of learning the simple basic skills of life and love, children today are taught how to manipulate the illusionary world of computer screens, moving imaginary characters around, killing and maiming the enemy, which is normally some politically propagandized and illusionary evil role model. Most people do not realize the incredible amounts of money made from the multi-billion-dollar worlds of illusion. But they also don't realize the propaganda content is immense. In fact, there are many games strategically funded by governments and other agenda-driven authorities and organizations that are specifically written to suck in the minds of the youth into particular ways of thinking. This creates masses of later controllable young adults for the financial war machine and good voters who are now loyal to the cause. We are all pawns in a game that has gone out of control because it is a life spent in an illusionary world. Now we have a world of technology that is overtaking us, and we have to somehow try to keep our heads wrapped around the lightning speed with which it moves. There are even extensions to the computer game dream world. As with mobile phones, we can in fact take this world of illusion with us anywhere we go. There is no escaping this phenomena, because the human tribal instinct is to be as good or better than anybody else, and to be accepted in our society forces us to participate. In addition, these are new ways for the marketing man to catch us, because they now buy advertising space in the illusionary world of the game or internet. So even the marketing man is being sold an illusion, a billboard in the land of illusion. Advertising billboards in a fake downtown city carries the same old messages, and we subconsciously buy into the perception encoded and created. We are lying to ourselves in a world of lies, and we only have ourselves to blame. We kill ourselves to afford to buy a product we don't need at an inflated price, because of advertising costs of billboards in a land that doesn't exist. Stand back and think about how stupid this all is. By extension, there are now secondary worlds created on the World Wide Web of deceit, where we can recreate ourselves and live out a life of illusion so that we do not really have to face ourselves and our situations. We can truly offload all responsibility now and become another person as an extension of our worldly ego. Before we know it, we die mentally and spiritually, let alone grow fat and insipid whilst glued to the screen. In this created world, we can even buy fake real estate using real hard-earned money. We can then impress our real friends who join us within this unreal world as if we are really that fake creation by the extension of technology. Around us, 1 million species die every year, and awful suffering is in reality happening because we use energy to disappear into the dark worlds of desire. And so technology, like everything else we humans create, is truly an extension of ourselves, and it yet again is a world of falseness, covering up the real mess we are in. The truth is that the technology we created with all good intentions is now driving us, and we have become extensions of the machine itself. These leaps in technology are part and parcel of the human evolutionary cycle from the flint spear to the space shuttle. We cannot stop them, but we ought to be aware of their effects upon the human mind. The system is now beyond human nature. We have created a monster, a Frankenstein, and we have lost ourselves. The lesson to learn is that just like the Frankenstein monster, it is a mirror of ourselves, and it is destroying the very essence of what we are. All of this is why even now, in the 21st century, we remain stupid humans who constantly battle with each other, because we are forcing ourselves away further and further from the truth of what we really are. We have created a world of imagination in which we can live out a dream life, and to pay for it, we live in hell. Because we live in a world of technology that dehumanizes us, and we eat addictive food because of the inhuman state and speed of our existence, we end up with a confused mind. Our children are like sponges, and so we have to question what we are teaching them. In addition to this, political correction has gone mad as we try to rebalance a world of insane effects our system is causing. Today, children are being fed drugs by those doctors we are taught to trust because it speeds up the process of supposed mental correction and enables the drug companies to maximize profits and health officials to get more cattle through the surgery. Speed, profit, and dehumanizing are the keys to the system we have created, and they are all based upon fear and used by those in power to control us. Parents no longer have the skills or time to bring up their own children because of workload, and so they pay others to do it for them. They buy their children's love with computers and mobile phones, and feed the growing child's sense of disassociation from their parents, society, and their own humanity. The parents end up in a cycle of debt they cannot escape, and in fact constantly refeed the system of madness. The children have no idea what is happening to them and become depressed, hypersensitive, and undisciplined. The answer is, as ever, drugs. We pile all manner of chemicals into our children, starting with the fast food and ending in the pharmaceutical giants' drugs. What are we creating for the future of the world? We destroy the environment, and now we even destroy the minds of our children. The whole process is madness and simply feeds the profit of corporations who cause the problem and then sell us the cure. And yet, we cannot be absolved of responsibility, no matter how hard we try. We have only ourselves to blame because we ought to know better. Adults have the free will to learn and gather this knowledge, and yet we would rather spend our hard-earned money gambling, buying more drugs in the form of alcohol, cigarettes, and even illegal substances, and desperately trying to liven up our dull lives with extreme sports or watching the stars parade on television. We prefer to pay thousands in loans to get a huge 4x4, which destroys the environment and places us deeper into the cycle of debt like a hamster on a wheel. And yet none of it satisfies us, and we ourselves fall into depression, which requires more spending and more drugs. We visit psychologists, priests, and buy all kinds of products to make us feel better, and yet never manage to discover the secret formula for our own happiness. The confused web we spin around ourselves clouds the fact that our happiness will only be found in simplicity, from where we came. Instead, we act like spoiled brats and never grow, learn, or mature. Our children copy, and we increase the depression and problems of the world, and we call it freedom. True freedom is knowledge of the state we are in, and an understanding that we do not need to partake of this food of evil. Wherever man finds a marketplace, wherever he sets up a stall, then lies and deceit quickly follow, because it is within our nature, and the sooner each one of us realizes that we have a shadow side, the better we will be to deal with it. The state reacts like a larger version of ourselves and will jump on lies and deceit where found or highlighted, and so more and more state control is the result. And because the state is a larger version of ourselves, it too has a shadow side, and it too uses lies and deceit. Why, therefore, would anybody hand over the responsibility, respect, and life to state or religion when they are manifestations of the divided mind of man? We do this because we are dumbed down. To dumb down is quite simply to treat people as if they were dumb, and this is a big issue in the world today. It is not just within the realms of television. This occurs too on radio, in magazines, on the internet, and in direct sales efforts such as telesales and direct mail. We are all constantly bombarded with this inept nonsense. We no longer have to think too hard, because all the work is being done for us. The answers to quizzes are easy, the traps set, and the gullible beguiled. It seems everybody and everything in the public gaze is now succumbing to these methods. Even our politicians speak to the masses as if they are stupid, and we only have ourselves to blame. You see, there is a reason for all this, and it may be driven by greed, but it is used because of one thing. Because all these simple systems work on the majority of people, from young to old, then the rest of us have to put up with it. This is the lowest common denominator. For instance, we all have to put up with the government that democracy says is the popular choice. The votes are being cast by the same people who rush to their phones and spend millions on things they don't need. Is this an intellectual decision? Are we truly getting the government that is best for us? Or are we getting the government that has proven to be the best at spinning a dumbed-down message to the masses? The fact is that whatever the masses are fed will be the result of what the masses produce. If we feed animals rubbish all the time, then they will eventually lose strength, energy, die younger, and have reduced brain power. We are doing exactly this to ourselves, and we only have ourselves to blame because we begin the cycle ourselves by watching the programs, reading the magazines, and listening to the radio stations. Once trapped into the cycle, we will find it difficult to get out again, because we do not even realize we are in it. Because this banal nonsense works on the masses, we all have no choice but to switch off or join in. There are precious few outlets left for those who know themselves and think for themselves. We are already losing strength and energy, and the masses certainly are experiencing reduced brain power as governments reduce school targets and the media lower their standards daily to accommodate the power of the mass buy. In today's world, there are millions of battles fought daily between marketing men and advertisers, producers and directors, radio hosts and designers, all scrambling around, finding the latest and most advanced method of producing an experience for the people, to grab their attention, keep their interest and form desires leading to actions. Alas, the actions required are now more often than not to spend our money or move us to vote one way or another. They are manipulations of a brain that is not thinking for itself and therefore will do as it's told. This is why images, sound, and feel are all created for us by the corporate giants, so that we don't have a chance to think for ourselves and therefore follow like lemmings, however subtly this may be. Of course, there is nothing new or different here to what has been happening for an awfully long time. Every Sunday, the masses would be crammed like sardines into church, where the priest would read to them. The masses were not allowed to read or learn Latin. This was the role of the elite. Instead, the people had to believe what they were being told. More than that, though, the bored or inattentive would find it easier to stare at the stained glass windows where depictions and images of the stories were relayed in simple form for the ordinary man to comprehend. Songs were created using repetition and alliteration, ramming the message home, and we repeated these catchy tunes in our minds, thus distracting us yet again from thinking for ourselves. Man did not have to think for himself, and so followed blindly. there is nothing different happening today. Instead of filing into church on Sunday morning, the people wake to the annoyance of the alarm clock, which tells them what to do. They then pour a coffee full of caffeine for the daily fix. Over breakfast, instead of conversing and sharing with their family, they sit like zombies and watch the television where they are fed yet more rubbish. They are fully prepared for the daily cycle of earn and spend, before they then try to wind down with alcohol and fall asleep watching yet more rubbish whilst eating junk food. Today, billions of humans exist on this planet of ours, and it is growing by the day. We are storing up and creating a human bomb that will one day explode inwardly or outwardly as a result of the oppressive nature of our media and capitalist-led system. This is no different to why Russia exploded with the Red Revolution, or why the French rose up against the oppressive royalty. Islam uses this scenario as a tool to beat the West, and would only replace it with another form of oppression in the form of the written word, the Quran. It seems that no matter which period of modern history we wish to look at, the same forms of oppression and dumbing down have been utilized to great extent, whether by government, religion, or royalty. And today, things have stepped up. Let us just imagine for one moment, what would be the biggest thing we could come up with to put terror into the hearts of mankind so that they would hand over almost any of their freedoms? How could you scare the whole planet? What would make people volunteer to lose the freedoms they believe they have? To be injected, monitored, controlled, and lose freedom of speech. And then, once this is in place, why not double it with a new red peril from the East? All of this has been written about and even placed in movies as so-called science fiction. And yet, it has actually now happened. All we need now are microchips implanted in our brains for ultimate control. And all of this has worked because of nature. We are driven by the force of nature, and this force affects our moods and actions. It is used by those who would want power to manipulate us. Understanding our psyche at this very root level is a bonus to the marketing man who can recognize the drive and railroad us at an unconscious level into action. But just because we now recognize our own true nature, and just because we know that we can be manipulated, does not necessarily mean that we either want to escape the loop, nor know how. We ought to by now have gathered that most of the mental and physical food we eat is utter rubbish. From the commercials on TV, radio, in magazines and newspapers to the internet, from commercially aligned television programs to dumbed-down pop for the masses, from junk food and drink to drugs and immoderate abuse of alcohol. All these things are junk for our body and mind. Companies are playing on the emotions and evolutionary desires within us. We know that their messages are contrived to soften the blow. We know that they clear huge rainforests to feed the billions of cows required for their burgers. We know that their food is having an effect upon our body and indeed our mind. We know that it will shorten our lives, make us obese and slow-witted. No matter what influences have preyed upon us, and no matter how much we have wished to hand over the responsibility for our actions and thoughts, we are an equal part of the universe to everybody else, and we share in our responsibility of it. No matter how much we believe in this God or that, no matter which political form we adhere to, and no matter what experience we believe has formed our own personal belief systems, we are in fact at the root of it all, an individual life form driven by the force and power of nature from which we came and to which we shall go. Cast off the haze of mental and physical control that has been placed upon you for generations and free your mind.